Some stories don't start with a hero. They start with a body and a question no one dares to answer. Like this girl is found in the middle of a sugarcane field, naked, kneeling, her body painted in strange symbols, her head crowned with twisted branches. Around her, strange figures made of sticks hanging from trees like silent witnesses. The police can't explain it. The press calls it ritualistic. But detectives Rustin Cole and Martin Hart know this isn't just a killing, it's something else. Something planned. Something meant to be seen. Cole, the quiet one, looks at the scene like he's seen it before. Martin, the family man, tries to convince himself it's just another case. But deep down, both of them can feel it. This murder is the beginning of something much bigger. Out here, in the endless fields and forgotten towns of Louisiana, evil doesn't always hide in the dark. Sometimes, it worships in daylight. The two detectives began the investigation that would haunt them for decades. At this point, Rust and Marty have only been partners for about 3 months. Rust is quiet, introverted, and hard to read, while Marty is more social and straightforward. Trying to get to know him better, Marty invites Rust to have dinner with his family. As night falls, they return to the station. Marty, being the senior detective, is the one who reports the murder to the mayor. A case like this, gruesome and ritualistic, has never happened in their small Louisiana town, so the mayor immediately plans to hold a press conference. The mayor asks Marty what he thinks of his new partner. Marty says Rust is a loner, someone who doesn't like to socialize, but he's incredibly sharp and doesn't lose focus easily. Later that evening, while Marty is still writing his report, Rust quietly leaves. He drives to a truck stop, a place known for prostitution, hoping to find clues. Inside a dimly lit bar, Rust begins questioning the local workers, asking if they recognize the woman who was recently found dead. The women at the bar say they don't know of any missing dance worker, so it seems none of them recognize the victim. The next morning, Rust arrives early at the station and tells Marty that the victim has been identified. Her name is Dora Kelly Lang, and yes, she was a night shift worker. They examine Dora's body but find no fingerprints at all. It's been completely wiped clean. Toxicology reports show traces of meth and LSD in her system. That means Dora had been drugged, tied up, tortured, killed, and then carefully displayed. Not long after, Rust and Marty head out to a rundown neighborhood near where Dora's body was found. A man there asks if the dead woman could be Marie Fontenot, a young girl who went missing years ago. But clearly, Dora isn't Marie. Dora is an adult woman. Their next stop is a small local church, where they question a priest about Marie's disappearance. The priest doesn't know much, but when Rust shows him the strange twig symbols they found earlier, the triangle and the spiral, the priest explains that he doesn't recognize them as any church symbol. However, he mentions that twigs are sometimes used as charms to ward off evil spirits, meant to trap demons that come too close. A little later, the detectives visit the sheriff's office to ask about the old case of Marie Fontenot, the one the police never properly investigated. The sheriff says the case was handled by his predecessor. According to him, Marie was taken away by her biological father after her mother fell into drug addiction. Marty recalls another report from just a few months ago. A young boy had claimed he was chased through the woods by a monster. But again, the local police ignored it. The sheriff laughs it off, saying the kid was talking about a green-eared spaghetti monster. The department dismissed it as hallucination and dropped the case entirely. The next day, Rust and Marty visit Dora's ex-husband, a man named Charlie who's currently in custody. He says he hasn't spoken to Dora in years. He didn't even know she was dead. But a few weeks earlier, Dora had called him out of the blue. Charlie needed money and Dora owed him. She had asked a friend named Carla to contact him first. When Dora finally called, she sounded high, rambling about wanting to become a nun and meeting a king. That night, Rust shows up at Marty's house for dinner, drunk. He meets Marty's wife, Maggie Hart, and their 2 daughters. Over dinner, Rust opens up a bit about himself. He says he's originally from Texas but grew up in Alaska. Back in Texas, he worked in narcotics before being transferred to Louisiana. He also mentions he was once married, but the marriage ended after their daughter died in an accident. The next morning at the station, one of the detectives helping them mentions that someone knows about Marty's uncle, who lives nearby. Even though the confirmed victim is Dora, Rust starts to suspect that the disappearance of Marie Fontenot might somehow be connected to her murder. Soon after, the sheriff introduces them to a local preacher named Reverend Billy Lee Tuttle. The case of Dora Lang remains unsolved, and people in the community are starting to talk. To calm public concern, the church steps in. Reverend Tuttle offers to form a special task force to investigate crimes with what he calls anti-Christian elements. But Rust doesn't buy it. He makes it clear he wants nothing to do with Tuttle's idea. Not long after, the detectives visit Marty's uncle, who's been partially paralyzed by a stroke. Marty asks him about Marie Fontenot. Wasn't she taken away by her father, not missing? But his uncle denies it. He says they haven't heard from the girl's father in years. While they talk, Rust's attention drifts toward the old chicken coop outside. He walks over and notices something inside. When he calls Marty over to check, they discover another twig sculpture, exactly like the one found near Dora's body. This confirms Rust's suspicion. Whoever kidnapped Marie and whoever murdered Dora, it's likely the same person or at least someone from the same circle. Later, they visit Dora's mother. She tells them that Dora's father died in an accident back in the 1980s. Dora had always been a troubled girl, but after separating from her husband Charlie, she seemed to be turning her life around. About a month before her death, Dora came to visit her mother and said she had been going to church more often, though she never mentioned which church. Following that lead, Rust and Marty tracked down Carla, Dora's friend, the same one Charlie told them about. Carla also recalls Dora talking about attending church frequently, but she doesn't know the name or location of the place either. A few months earlier, Dora had moved into a women's shelter in the southern area, near a cluster of trailer homes. That night, we see another side of Marty. Despite being married, he's been having an affair with a young woman named Lisa Tragnetti, and it's been going on for quite some time. Elsewhere, Rust revisits one of the prostitutes he interviewed earlier, but this time not for questions. Rust suffers from severe insomnia, and he's there to buy sleeping pills to get through the night. He asks her if she knows anything about a trailer park down south, where Dora might have stayed. She's not sure, but says she's heard rumors about a place like that, a trailer community in the southern woods. The next morning, Marty shows up at the station wearing the same clothes as yesterday. He never went home. Rust quietly notices the difference, the smell of alcohol, perfume, and makes a small comment. Marty takes offense. Rust doesn't back down, but he also doesn't retaliate, even though he clearly could. Marty eventually cools off and walks away. Soon after, they drive south to search for the rumored trailer park, but it's harder to find than they expected. They ask 2 local mechanics for directions, but the men refuse to talk. Frustrated, Marty wants to leave, but Rust decides to go back, this time with force. Rust, being more experienced in field work, handles the situation smoothly and gets the information he needs. He returns to Marty and says he's found it. They follow a dirt road into the woods until they spot a few abandoned trailers surrounded by trees. And when they get closer, they realize they've come to the right place. The area is filled with women, confirming it's a hidden spot for prostitution. They meet the woman who runs the place, the manager of the Southern Trailer Park. She recognizes Dora Lang right away. Dora had been living there for a few weeks. One of the younger women, a close friend of Dora's, says Dora was kind, different from the others. But something about her changed after she started going to church. Marty feels uneasy. The girl looks way too young to be working there, but there's nothing he can do about it. Before leaving, Marty quietly slips her some money, hoping she'll find another way to live, maybe even start over. Meanwhile, Rust has found Dora's old diary among her belongings. Inside, he reads something strange. Dora had written, "When I close my eyes, I see the yellow king of Carcosa running through the forest." Marty thinks she was high when she wrote that, but inside the diary they also find a church pamphlet. That could be the place Dora visited before she died. The next day, on their day off, Marty spends time with his wife's family. But it's clear he and his father-in-law don't get along. They're polite, but distant. Maggie's mother notices something's off with her daughter, but Maggie brushes it off, saying she's fine. At the same time, Rust spends his weekend alone, digging through old reports and missing person files, searching for any connection between Dora Lang and Marie Fontenot. He finds nothing new. The following day, the detectives track down the church from Dora's pamphlet, but when they arrive, they find nothing but a burned-out shell. The building's been abandoned for years. Inside the charred ruins, graffiti covers the walls. And among the faded symbols, they see something chilling, a painting of a woman posed just like Dora's body was found. Days later, they come across a tent revival, packed with people listening to a preacher named Joel Theriault. Rust, being skeptical of religion, sees it as another hustle, a show to take money from desperate people looking for salvation. After the sermon, they approach Joel and show him Dora's photo. He doesn't recognize her name, but he says she looks familiar. He's probably seen her in the crowd a few times. He's been preaching here for 6 months, ever since his old church burned down. Someone from the congregation tells Marty they once saw Dora with a tall man, someone hard to forget because of a burn scar along his jawline. No one knows who the man is, but that detail sticks with Rust. Later, Rust checks the background of one of Joel's assistants, a mentally challenged man named Bert, who has a criminal record and once served time. Rust immediately grows suspicious. In his experience, people with unstable minds can sometimes be drawn into crimes like this. Joel asks quietly, "Was Dora assaulted?" Rust nods. Joel insists that if Rust talks to Bert personally, he'll see the man's innocent. Rust agrees, and after a short conversation, he knows Joel is right. Bert isn't the killer. He's broken, deeply disturbed, and during his time in prison, he'd even mutilated himself. Rust realizes this man couldn't have done it. For now, Bert is off the list. The real killer is still out there. And Rust starts to believe the answers won't be found inside any church. The only clue they had was about a tall man with burn scars on his jaw. A few days later, on the weekend, Rust was at Marty's house with Maggie while Marty was out. When Marty came home, he noticed that his lawn had been freshly cut. It turns out Rust had borrowed his lawnmower, and as a thank you, he mowed Marty's lawn before returning it. When Rust was about to leave, Marty stopped him. Marty didn't like the idea of Rust being around his wife when he wasn't home. He told Rust not to do it again. The next day, they found a man who matched the description, tall with burn scars on his jaw. Rust interrogated him until the man broke down in tears. But Rust quickly realized this wasn't the man he was looking for. Rust kept working late into the night, digging through old case files. Later, he went to a bar because Maggie wanted to introduce him to her friend. The woman's name was Jennifer, a nurse. Rust, who usually kept to himself, didn't resist the idea. Surprisingly, he felt quite comfortable around Jennifer. But at the same bar, Marty saw Lisa, his mistress, with another man. He went over, pretending to get a drink, and confronted her. Marty didn't like seeing Lisa with someone else. Lisa told him she wanted to end things, that she wanted to move on with her life and eventually get married. After the event, drunk and angry, Marty showed up at Lisa's house. He lost control, yelling, lashing out, even attacking Lisa's boyfriend. Naturally, this destroyed whatever was left of their relationship. The next morning, Marty arrived at the office. Rust showed him what he'd been working on, a case about a body found after a flood. Rust believed this victim had been killed by the same person who murdered Dora. The wounds were identical, the body tested positive for meth and LSD, and there was even the same circular symbol carved on the back. The victim's grandfather was still alive, so Rust suggested they talk to him. They drove to a small town to meet the old man. He told them he didn't believe his grandson, the son of a fisherman, drowned by accident. He also revealed that his grandson once dated someone named Reggie Ledoux. The boy had attended a Christian school sponsored by Tuttle's program before it was shut down. They went to visit the school, now abandoned, though a caretaker still maintained the grounds. Rust didn't stay to inspect the place because Marty had just received a new lead on Reggie's criminal record. Reggie had been arrested before for being involved with meth labs and LSD, the same drugs found in Dora's system. But now he was out of prison. And that made Reggie Ledoux their prime suspect. The first person they questioned was Charlie, Dora's ex-husband. Apparently, Reggie had once shared a prison cell with him. Charlie described Reggie as tall, muscular, and terrifying. One day, Charlie once showed a photo of Dora to Reggie. Charlie knew that Reggie could make drugs, and that he was someone prone to hallucinations. Reggie had told stories about a place in the South, where rich people gathered, devil worshippers who performed strange rituals. A place called Carcosa, ruled by the Yellow King, where children and women were offered as sacrifices. And the circular mark found on the victim's back? It was their symbol. Charlie mentioned that if they could find a man named Tyrone, they might be able to track down Reggie. A few days later, Lisa filed a complaint against Marty for destroying her house. But Marty, being a cop, testified that he found drugs in Lisa's home, a lie he used to protect himself. Later, they began searching for Tyrone. The first person they met was his mother, but she hadn't seen her son in a long time. They then found Tyrone's ex-girlfriend, who worked as a stripper. But they'd broken up and she didn't know where he was either. Marty asked the bartender about Tyrone, who was known to hang around another bar. Time passed, and when Marty got home, he saw a suitcase and a letter waiting for him. It turned out Lisa, angry about Marty's false statement, had told Maggie about their affair. Maggie was furious and decided to leave him. That night, even with his marriage falling apart, Marty went looking for Tyrone. He found him and didn't hesitate to attack. Marty demanded to know where Reggie was. Tyrone told him he'd heard that Reggie was still cooking meth, but he wasn't selling it anymore. Now he was producing drugs exclusively for a biker gang in Texas called the Iron Crusaders. Marty passed this information to Rust. Rust, who used to work in the narcotics division in Texas, knew the gang because years ago he had gone undercover inside it. Later that day, Marty came to Rust's house. Rust showed him the heavy weapons he had kept from his undercover days. As far as Rust knew, his cover hadn't been blown. That meant they could go undercover again to find Reggie. Rust explained that the Iron Crusaders were one of the most violent biker gangs in Texas, controlling much of the drug trade there. To make himself look like a junkie again, Rust injected ink mixed with chili powder under his skin, creating fake needle marks and bruises. He also took seized drugs from the station to use as props for the operation. Once they had everything prepared, they headed to Texas. Rust gave Marty a phone that only he had the number to, their private line during the mission. That night, Rust entered a bar while Marty waited outside in the parking lot for a signal. Inside, Rust met one of his old contacts, Ginger. Rust told him that for the past few years, he'd been working in Mexico for a cocaine distributor. He offered to trade that cocaine for the LSD that Reggie was making. Ginger wasn't sure whether to trust him or not. To prove his loyalty, Rust had to help him pull off a robbery, and Rust reluctantly agreed. Rust was taken by Ginger to his hideout, where he met 2 other gang members. Their plan was dangerous. They would disguise themselves as police officers and rob a black gang. To make it look real, they had already kidnapped one of the gang members to pose as if he'd been arrested. They drove into the neighborhood wearing police uniforms so no one dared to interfere. Rust was dropped off behind the house, while the others entered through the front. Inside, they stormed the place and gathered everyone into one room. They had barely a minute to grab all the cash inside. But then one of Rust's partners pulled the trigger, and chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded in every direction. They were surrounded. Rust fought back fiercely, taking down everyone except Ginger, whom he dragged out of there. Using a phone from one of the nearby houses, Rust called Marty for backup. Minutes later, Marty arrived and managed to save both Rust and Ginger. Rust's reason for saving Ginger was simple. He needed Ginger to lead him straight to Reggie. Time passed, and finally, Ginger brought Rust to meet Reggie face to face. Rust offered him a deal to trade cocaine for the LSD that Reggie produced. But Reggie wasn't interested. He didn't need money, and he refused the offer. Thinking fast, Rust convinced Ginger to show him where Reggie was actually cooking his drugs. The place was deep in the woods, surrounded by dangerous traps. But Rust, an experienced undercover cop, moved through them easily. At the center of the forest stood a rundown shack, Reggie's hideout. From a distance, they saw him. Moving quickly, they launched an assault. Marty captured one of Reggie's men and dragged him outside. Rust kept watch over the prisoner while Marty went back inside. From the window, Reggie spotted Rust standing outside. Moments later, a gunshot echoed. Marty had executed the captured man with a bullet to the head. Reggie bolted into the forest, but ran straight into one of his own traps. It killed him instantly. Rust went inside to find out what had set Marty off, and that's when he saw it. 2 children were being held captive inside the shack. They had been missing for weeks. One boy had already died several days earlier, but the girl was still alive. With Reggie dead, the police closed the Dora case. Marty and Rust became local heroes. Life slowly returned to normal. Marty reconciled with Maggie, and though it took time, their marriage began to heal. Rust continued his relationship with Jennifer. 7 years later, in 2002, Marty's daughters were now teenagers and life seemed stable again. Rust was doing fine too, though he still lived alone without a family of his own. By now, Rust's reputation as a brilliant investigator had become the pride of the department. Whenever a suspect refused to confess, they'd send in Rust. One day, Rust was interrogating a murder suspect, pushing him calmly but relentlessly to admit his crime. Finally, the man broke. He confessed, realizing he had made a terrible mistake. But then he said something strange. He claimed he knew who really killed Dora, and that it wasn't Reggie. He said the real killer was still out there, still killing. Rust didn't believe him. But the man went on, saying he had once met the real murderer, a figure he called the Yellow King. Those words hit Rust hard. He lost control, grabbed the man, and attacked him, until other officers pulled him away. But the name the Yellow King kept echoing in his mind. Haunted by the thought, Rust convinced Marty to visit the suspect again. But when they arrived, it was too late. The man was dead, an apparent suicide. Security footage showed him leaving his cell briefly to take a phone call from his lawyer. but then returning escorted by 2 officers. Moments later, blood began seeping out from under his cell door. Rust became suspicious of the 2 policemen, Childress and Mahoney, who had escorted him. He traced the phone call's location, but it had come from a public payphone, which meant the caller wasn't his lawyer. Someone else had contacted him. Determined to find answers, Rust went alone to an old, abandoned school he'd visited before. The place was dark, silent, and falling apart. On the walls, disturbing drawings. And scattered around the rooms were dozens of strange stick figures, just like the ones found near Dora's body, only now there were many more. Rust realized this wasn't over. He began conducting his own secret investigation without Marty's knowledge. He spoke with families of missing children. One grieving parent told him the police had stopped searching for her child, claiming the boy was probably eaten by alligators. That same parent also revealed her son had attended a Christian school, one sponsored by the Tuttle Foundation. Meanwhile, Marty was living a quieter life. He stopped by a phone shop to buy a new cell phone, then decided to grab a drink at a nearby bar. There, he bumped into the same saleswoman who had sold him the phone, a young woman named Beth. But Beth wasn't just anyone. Years earlier, Marty and Rust had met her while investigating Dora's case. Back then, she was a teenage prostitute. Now, thanks in part to Marty's past help, she had managed to turn her life around. At the same time, Rust sought out Reverend Joel, a former pastor who had once taught at one of those Tuttle-sponsored Christian schools. Rust asked him what he knew about the school's sponsorship and the people behind it. Joel hesitated but finally spoke. He said that one night, while cleaning the library, he accidentally dropped an old book. When it hit the floor, several photographs slipped out, photos of naked children seemingly asleep. Shaken, Joel reported it to the school's vice principal, a man named Austin. But instead of investigating, Austin became furious and threatened him for even mentioning it. That's when Joel decided to quit his job and leave that world behind. Meanwhile, Marty had been meeting Beth more often. He admired how she had turned her life around, how someone so lost could change. But eventually, Marty betrayed Maggie again by having an affair with Beth. A few days later, Rust and Marty were assigned to a new case, a mother who had murdered her own child. Using his sharp instincts, Rust managed to get her to confess, not by shouting but by making her write it all down. Then Rust asked Marty to write up the woman's statement while he went to handle something else. Marty didn't like being ordered around. He wasn't as skilled as Rust when it came to solving cases, and deep down he knew Rust was the reason his record looked good. That resentment started to grow. The something else Rust had to do was visit a psychiatric hospital for children. He wanted to see the little girl they'd rescued from Reggie years ago. The child was deeply traumatized, silent, withdrawn. When Rust gently asked who had hurt her, she whispered that the man with scars on his face was the worst of them all. But just remembering it made her panic and scream, forcing Rust to leave. Word of this visit quickly reached the police chief, who called Rust in for questioning. Rust insisted something darker was still going on, that Reggie wasn't the only one involved in the kidnappings and murders. But he had no proof yet. One day, Maggie was doing laundry when she noticed something strange. Marty was washing his own clothes. Her instincts told her something was wrong. She checked his phone, and there it was, intimate photos of Beth. Now she knew. Marty had cheated again. But this time, Maggie didn't explode. She stayed calm, pretending nothing was wrong. Elsewhere, Rust visited Reverend Tuttle himself, who oversaw the network of Christian schools. Rust requested staff records from one of the Tuttle-sponsored schools, particularly from the years connected to the earlier investigation. Tuttle agreed to provide the files in a few days. Rust also asked about Austin, the vice principal who had bullied Joel into quitting. Tuttle replied that Austin had been fired for embezzlement and had since died. The next day, Tuttle called the police chief to complain. Soon after, Rust was summoned and harshly reprimanded. As punishment, he was suspended from duty for a month. That night, Maggie showed up at Rust's apartment. She confessed that Marty had cheated on her again and that she wanted revenge. Before Rust could stop her, Maggie kissed him. He didn't resist. They slept together, but afterward, both were filled with guilt and disgust. Rust told her to leave, furious with himself and with her. Later that evening, Maggie waited for Marty to come home from seeing Beth. When he walked in, she told him the truth, that she had slept with Rust. Marty exploded in anger. But Maggie knew he wouldn't hurt her. And for the first time, Marty had to face the pain he'd caused and the wreckage of everything he'd built. The next day, Marty heard that Rust had come to the station to collect his things from his desk. Furious, Marty stormed in and attacked Rust without hesitation. Rust didn't fight back at first. He could have easily overpowered Marty, but he held himself back. Other officers quickly separated them. That day marked the end of their partnership, and they wouldn't see each other again for the next 10 years. Rust, still under suspension, decided to resign from the force. A decade later, in 2012, we're back where the story began. Marty and Rust had just finished their police interrogation, sitting across from the detectives asking about the old Dora Lang case. It was the first time they'd seen each other in years. Marty, older now, had buried the past. Afterward, they went to a bar. Over drinks, Rust revealed that he had never stopped investigating, still chasing the truth behind the kidnappings of women and children across Louisiana. He told Marty he no longer trusted the police, because someone inside the department had been covering everything up. Rust needed Marty's help to finish what they started, the Dora Lang murder. That night, they drove to Rust's private storage unit. Inside were stacks of files, photos, and evidence, everything Rust had gathered over the years. The biggest mystery still haunting him was the Yellow King and Carcosa. According to Rust's research, the disappearances of women and children all happened within a 10-mile radius of the Christian schools funded by Tuttle. And that, Rust believed, was why Tuttle had interfered in the Dora Lang case, because he was somehow involved. Some time ago, Rust had tracked down a former student from one of Tuttle's schools. He asked her if anything strange had ever happened there. She said one night she couldn't move, paralyzed though she wasn't asleep. Through half-closed eyes, she saw several men wearing animal masks, taking photos of her and other children, naked and terrified. She remembered that among them were 3 young men. Not all of them wore masks. One had deep scars across his face. Rust believed that one of the teachers from that school was part of the killings. He also suspected that the stories children told about being chased by a green-eared spaghetti monster came from the masked men they had seen during the rituals. Rust showed Marty several photos from a rural festival, images of young girls dressed and posed like Dora Lang. Then he asked Marty for help accessing official police files on unsolved murders and missing persons. Marty asked what had happened to Reverend Tuttle since he was now dead. Rust explained that before Tuttle's death, he had often broken into his house searching for evidence. One night, he found a safe filled with disturbing photographs, children with their eyes covered. But the most horrifying discovery was a videotape. Rust played it for Marty. On the screen, they watched a small child being led into the woods by several masked men. Then, the child was assaulted and murdered. Marty couldn't finish watching. He walked away in shock, trembling, realizing that the evil they had faced years ago had never truly ended. Rust told Marty that the girl in the video was Marie Fontenot, and he insisted he didn't kill Tuttle. It seemed that someone higher up, someone far more powerful, had realized Tuttle might expose their cult, so they silenced him. After seeing and hearing all this, Marty finally agreed to help Rust. They moved all of Rust's files to Marty's private office, because by now Marty had left the police force and opened his own private detective agency. To dig deeper, Marty went back to the police station, pretending he was writing a true crime book. Under that pretense, he requested access to old kidnapping and murder files from the 1990s. Once he got them, he met Rust at the bar where Rust had been working. But there was a problem. The file on Marie Fontenot was missing. Rust introduced Marty to the bar owner, Robert, who was also a victim. His child had been among the missing. Together, they went to find Reggie's half-brother, who worked at a mechanic's shop. They asked him about the man with the scars on his face. The man remembered him, but said he wasn't part of the Ledoux family. He didn't know his name, only that he'd seen him before. Their next visit was to an elderly woman named Dolores, who used to work as a housemaid for Tuttle's parents. She revealed that Tuttle's father had many illegitimate children from different women. When Rust asked her about the man with the scars, her eyes widened. She remembered him. He was one of Tuttle's illegitimate grandchildren from the Childress family, and those scars on his face were caused by his own father. When Rust showed her the small twig sculptures, the same kind found near Dora's body, Dolores trembled. She asked softly, "Do you know Carcosa?" Then she suddenly broke down, screaming and crying hysterically, forcing Rust and Marty to leave immediately. Time passed. Marty went back to re-examine the case of Marie Fontenot. He found out that the detective in charge back then was Steve Geraci, who was now the sheriff of another town. The next day, Rust arranged a golf game with Steve to get him talking. During their conversation, Marty brought up the Fontenot case. Steve claimed that Marie had simply run off with her father, and that's why he never pursued the investigation. He said he'd gotten that information from the previous sheriff, Ted Childress. A few days later, Marty met up with Steve again, this time for a fishing trip. But this was no friendly outing, it was a setup. Rust was waiting nearby, gun in hand, ready to interrogate him. Meanwhile, in another part of Louisiana, two uniformed officers were driving through the rural South, looking for the ruins of an old burned church. They got lost and stopped to ask for directions from a man mowing the cemetery grass. The man smiled and pointed them toward the road ahead. He had deep burn scars across his cheek. This was him, Errol Childress, the man Rust and Marty had been hunting all along. Errol lived deep in the woods in a decaying house with his half-sister, Betty, a place that felt completely outside of time. Back in the interrogation, Rust showed Steve the horrifying video recording. Steve turned pale with fear, realizing what he was seeing. He swore he knew nothing about the cult. He was just following orders from his superiors. Rust believed him, but gave a clear warning. He let Steve go, but told him to keep his mouth shut. As a reminder, Robert fired a sniper round into Steve's car, a message that couldn't be misunderstood. Not long after, Rust and Marty regrouped, ready to hunt down the final thread of this nightmare. They had to track down the relatives of Tuttle, the Childress family. But then something caught Marty's attention, the drawing of the green-eared mask they'd seen before. He compared two old photos of a house near Dora's neighborhood, one from years ago and one recent, and realized the house had been freshly painted green. That meant Green Ears wasn't a monster, it was the painter, the man who painted that house. Marty and Rust went to the house, but the original owner had moved into a nursing home. They visited the elderly woman and asked if she remembered having her house painted back in 1995. She did remember, but couldn't recall the painter's name, only that he had a scarred face. Rust asked if her husband used to file taxes regularly. From the tax records, they discovered that the paint job had been contracted to a company called Billy Childress & Sons. The next day, they drove to the listed address and arrived at the isolated, decaying home of Errol Childress. Marty knocked on the door and was greeted by Betty, Errol's deranged sister. She refused to let him in, but Marty forced his way through while Rust began searching the shed out back. From a distance, Rust caught a glimpse of Errol, but the man bolted, running deep into the woods. Inside the filthy, rotting house, Marty realized the truth. Whoever lived here was deeply disturbed, walls covered in filth, strange carvings, and a haunting, rancid smell in the air. Betty, still laughing uncontrollably, warned him in a cracked voice. "Errol's worse than anybody." Marty rushed outside to help Rust, but instead he stumbled into the shed. Inside, he found a horrifying sight, the decomposing body of Errol's father, tied and left to rot. Meanwhile, Rust followed Errol into the woods, where he came across the ruins of an ancient, moss-covered structure. Errol's voice echoed from the darkness, whispering, "Welcome to Carcosa." The sound bounced off the stone walls, making it impossible to tell where he was hiding. Rust ventured deeper into the labyrinth, the twisted remains of some long-forgotten temple. He found stick sculptures and 3 human skulls arranged in a ritual pattern. Then, from above, a blinding image, a strange, otherworldly vision, flashed before his eyes. In that moment of distraction, Errol lunged from the shadows, driving a knife deep into Rust's abdomen. Errol was incredibly strong, almost inhuman. Rust fought back, bloodied and weak, struggling to stay conscious. But he managed to break free just as Marty arrived. Marty fired his gun, hitting Errol, but the killer kept coming, hurling a hammer that knocked Marty to the ground. As Errol raised his blade to finish Marty, Rust, bleeding and barely standing, pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Errol in the head. And just like that, the monster of Carcosa was dead. Both men collapsed, gravely wounded. When night fell, police and medics finally arrived to rescue them. Time passed. Marty awoke in a hospital bed. His former colleagues told him that Errol and his family had been part of a satanic pedophile cult, hidden for decades within Louisiana's swamps. Days later, Rust, who had been in even worse condition, also survived. He was weak, scarred, but alive. And with that, the nightmare finally ended.